NRA TV with Bill Whittle.
Hi everybody, welcome to Hot Mike. I'm Bill Whittle. Hot Mike was here not 6-7 minutes ago, and then apparently he heard that there's a buy one, get one free sale at Old Navy, so he's gone, but we expect to have him back by tomorrow. We told you a story a little bit last week about a police officer in New York City, a lovely woman named Myosotis Familia. She was sitting in her police car, and somebody walked up to her. They said, describing it in the some of the surveillance video, they said with a purpose. Somebody walked up to her with purpose, shot her in the car, and she died at the hospital. There she is right now. By all accounts, a lovely woman, a family woman, and another police officer doing her job. Today, George Lopez had a comment to make. He posted something on his Instagram, and it was remarkable, I think. Let's have a look at what George Lopez, the comedian, pointed out today. He said, the Trump administration is deporting Latinos to make the streets safer. You want to make the streets safer? Deport the police. Now, I maintain that this tweet, or rather this Instagram of George Lopez looking like his badass self trying to get his street cred back, I maintain that this and the shooting of the police officer are connected, and that's a case I'm going to make for you right now. Folks, respect for law enforcement is something that's learned. Savages and animals don't have law enforcement. It's something that we have to learn. We learn it from our parents, and we also learn it from the pop culture. Leftists, especially Hollywood leftists and those in the news media, want you to believe that the reason there's been this incredible spate of mass shootings is because of all of a sudden the sudden availability of weapons and so-called assault rifles and all the rest. Well, it's just patently false. If you look at America in the 1950s and 60s, you could walk into any hardware store and buy a weapon, just walk out of there with it. You could do it in Walmart. You can do it in some places still in Walmart. There were no background checks. There was none of this stuff. 50, 60 years ago, every high school in the country had a shooting club. They usually held it in the basement or out in back of the school. School guns were everywhere. And on the first of these mass shooters at the University of Texas, professors went out to their cars. You heard me. College professors went out to their cars, got their hunting rifles out of the back, and suppressed the shooter while the police went up the stairs. So it's not that the guns have become more prevalent, but something has changed. And what's changed has been our entire attitude towards law enforcement and towards law enforcement personnel. And I can make this case very, very clearly. We're going to come back to George Lopez. But here's some of the things that the pop culture teaches you. Let's look at some of the things that the pop culture told somebody like me when I was growing up. Here's a clip from a show that you may remember. It was probably taped, I want to say, late 60s, early 70s. Here's about 40 seconds of this. Take a look.
In other words, you're a college man. She'd like to have seen you land a job with a little more status attached. Is that it?
I guess that's part of it.
But not all of it. I think maybe I can understand how she feels. And maybe she's right, Culver. It's awkward having a policeman around the house. Friends drop in, a man with a badge answers the door. The temperature drops 20 degrees. You throw a party and a badge gets in the way. All of a sudden, there isn't a straight man in the crowd. Everybody's a comedian. Don't drink too much, somebody says, and the man with a badge will run you in. Or how's it going, Dick Tracy? How many jaywalkers did you pinch today? And then there's always the one who wants to know how many apples you stole. All at once, you lost your first name. You're a cop, a flatfoot, a bull, a dick, John Law, you're the fuzz, the heat, you're poison, you're trouble, you're bad news. They call you everything, but never a policeman.
That, of course, is the legendary Jack Webb on Dragnet. And, of course, he had the show on radio for many, many years before he took it to TV. And, by the way, just a small little trivia event. The guy who he was talking to there is an actor named Kent McCord. And Kent McCord and Martin Milner were on a spin-off show from Dragnet called Adam 12. It's another show I grew up with, learning about police officers and the kind of work they do and the kind of lives they lead and how difficult it can be. So that's what I took in as a kid, and that's what most of you took in as a kid, too, if you were growing up in the 60s and 70s like I was. Let's have a look at something that kids took in when they were growing up in the late 90s. I'm going to show you a piece of Hollywood filmmaking now. The total segment's about 2 minutes. We're not going to watch that much of it. And I want to say two things about this. First thing I want to say is this is some of the best filmmaking I've ever seen. I saw this in a movie theater. I simply couldn't believe my eyes. This is Hollywood at its absolute best in terms of technical ability, in terms of shooting, special effects, editing, music, everything. It's absolutely perfect. It's absolutely magnificent. And it's also a form of pornography. Let's roll this second clip from, I want to say, from 1999. And watch what happens with law enforcement in this clip.
Please remove any metallic items you're carrying, keys, loose change. Holy.
Okay, here it comes. Now watch, because as I said, this is an absolutely incredible piece of filmmaking. Now these are security guards, of course, but obviously they're policemen. They're obviously law enforcement. There's no question about that. And you can see a guy with his little revolver there making a call for help, and what's her name, Trinity, just comes up and plain just executes him with a machine pistol of some kind. And now these two anti-heroes, as you can see, are marching into the bank. They casually draw their weapons, and now begins one of the most amazing sequences in the history of film. And I'm not exaggerating here. This gunfight in the lobby of The Matrix, that's this movie, The Matrix, with Keanu Reeves. This lobby sequence is absolutely astonishing. And watching this in the theater as I did, you are you're pardon the expression, blown away by it. It's so exciting. It's so mind-bogglingly intense. And on and on and on it goes. And you watch this, needless to say, you're on Neo's side, you're on the side of Keanu Reeves and so on. You're on the side of the guys in the black coats, for example. But even though the people who they are gunning down are wearing a badge that says police, they are without question a SWAT team. They are without question law enforcement officers. There's no question about it. And here we go again. The super slow motion. We have the gun carousel, we have the cartridges falling to the ground in slow motion, all the things exploding. They're doing reverse somersaults through the air. They're picking weapons off the ground in upside down slow motion. This is violence porn, is what it is. And in the audience watching this, I had no sense of what I was seeing. It's only now, or years later anyway, as I begin to wake up about these things, what I'm actually looking at. What I'm looking at here is I'm looking at the massacre of police officers in such a way that everybody in the audience is 100% behind it, and they think it's just really, really cool. This is what Hollywood has done. This is what's changed, not the presence of guns in America. This is what's changed in America since the days of the 50s and 60s when we didn't have these mass shootings. And by the way, I'm not going to mention their names because it's my policy not to mention the names of murderers whenever I can possibly help it. But the two people that started really the first of these modern mass shootings at Columbine, those two individuals were known as the Black Trench Coat Club. They were heavily influenced by The Matrix, heavily influenced by it. They dressed that way when they went in there to murder those innocent people at Columbine. So don't tell me that this doesn't have an effect. Now, there are free speech issues at work here, and there are all kinds of other issues, but what I'd like to do now is bring in a guest who we've had before, certainly a friend of the NRA, and much more importantly, a friend of law and order and law enforcement in this country, and that, of course, is our friend Sheriff Bill Wayborn from Tarrant County, Texas. Sheriff, it's great to have you back with us. How are you?
Great, Bill. It's good to be with you, sir.
Sheriff, I don't know if you're able to see that clip, but surely you've seen some of it. You've seen what goes on in modern movies. You've seen how this idea of the rise of the anti-hero means that the villains, the people who get gunned down by these cool gangsters, are often law enforcement personnel. When I was a kid, you used to hear this in virtually every show I ever saw or every movie. You'd hear some version of crime doesn't pay. But that's not the case anymore. You're a sheriff, modern-day sheriff. You look like a sheriff, you sound like a sheriff, and you strike me as the same kind of man that this country has always looked to for law enforcement. Do you feel that the pop culture has changed in such a way that it not only makes your job more difficult, it makes it more dangerous as well?
I absolutely believe that, and I think shows just like you showed right there is doing that. And obviously there are, the video games that kids are watching these days are off value. They are showing that the bad guys win, and the cops are just, it's okay to kill cops. And I agree with you that it makes it, dulls the senses, and it makes it okay to see what happened right there in New York with that single and that is something that I've seen that the values have gotten weak and lost.
I think I want to tie this back to George Lopez, because it's not just George Lopez. This is Hollywood and celebrities in Hollywood all the time. But when George Lopez says something like, hey, if you want to make the streets safer, instead of deporting the illegal aliens, why don't we just deport the police? I think that is dehumanizing the police, but more importantly, Sheriff, I think it's delegitimizing the police. Certainly, I'm not in any position to tell you this. I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. But it's kind of common knowledge that a policeman or a sheriff out there in the middle of the city doing his job is protected by his badge, and no one thinks that means that little piece of tin is going to stop a bullet. When you say protected by the badge, they're protected by the reverence and the respect that the citizens are supposed to have for law enforcement. And if George Lopez makes a statement like this, he's essentially weakening that protection. Do you think there's anything to that?
I think you're again spot on, and I think, and quite frankly, I'll be very frank on this. President Obama gave people permission to start doing this kind of thing. He downplayed the police, and he hit the police on several occasions and started this divisive activity. And then you have somebody like George Lopez. It's okay, he thinks, to do this, but I am extremely disappointed and think it's a very foolish thing. The days of Andy Griffith and Adam 12 and Dragnet and all of those wonderful things are gone. Probably the most positive police show that I've seen as of recently, and unfortunately it's not here anymore, but filmed right here in downtown Fort Worth, was Walker, Texas Ranger. And just behind me is the old courthouse that Chuck Norris ran up the steps, and as his brother Aaron filmed him. And that show did more for policing and the positive remarks of policing, and I sure wish people would be watching Walker.
Sheriff, I'm so happy you mentioned Andy Griffith, the Andy Griffith Show, because I'd just plain forgotten about that. There was a guy, and people may not think this is very important, but I think this is absolutely critically important. If you grew up watching the Andy Griffith Show, you realize that Sheriff Taylor was not just a good sheriff, he was a good man, he was a good father, and it was his virtue. It was his personal virtue that made Mayberry into kind of a little rural paradise where there is no crime. And Barney Fife, who's a little bit of a, egotist, obviously, he gets one bullet, he gets to keep it in his shirt pocket just so he doesn't hurt anybody with it. But it was the fundamental goodness of Andy Taylor that kept that town peaceful and safe. And that representation of police officers I haven't seen in 20 years now.
You are absolutely right, and I think that's what we need to be doing. And in real law enforcement, and I'd love to see pop culture bring those type of shows back and reinvent the Matt Dillons that always won and those type of things. But, what I encourage my peer group to do is we've got to be out there and we've got to work hard on building relationships with our community. And sometimes that can be difficult when people like George Lopez divide us.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be back right after this break. We're sitting here talking to an honest-to-God sheriff who knows what's going on, a real sheriff, a good man who's keeping law and order. And I don't know if you've noticed it, but I've certainly noticed that he's wearing a white hat like he's supposed to. We'll be back in just a few moments. This is Hot Mike on NRA TV.
Colin Noir, and inside this little black box is a new NRA TV app. With it, you can stay up to date with all of your Second Amendment news and NRA lifestyle programming on your HD TV. So download it now. Don't worry, I'll wait.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Hot Mike. I'm Bill Whittle, and we're talking today about the entire idea of how movies and television and the entire pop culture, which used to venerate police officers, law enforcement officials, sheriffs in the westerns, and so on and so forth, how that culture that used to venerate them has now come to the point where they've, at the very least, shown a great deal of disrespect, and in many cases, in fact, perhaps even most cases, have made law enforcement officers either pawns to get shot by guys in video games or in movies, or made them actively simply the villains. And the society at large is going to pay a price for something like that. We're very honored and pleased, I certainly am pleased, to have with us as a guest is our Tarrant County Sheriff, Bill Wayborn, who joins us again from Texas. And Sheriff Wayborn, you undoubtedly remember a little earlier this last year, I suppose it was, the quarterback for the 49ers, Colin Kaepernick, refused to stand during the national anthem. And he said it was a protest. He was on the side of the Black Lives Matter movement. He said he wasn't going to stand for the national anthem. He was going to take a knee because of all of the violence inflicted on people by the police officers in this country. Most people in this country had a lot to say about that, and I think Colin Kaepernick exercised his right to free speech, and we got to exercise ours as well. But these kind of things are seen by people, and they're seen by young people, and they're seen by people who perhaps are on the fence about this whole thing, and they see something like this, and it legitimizes the idea. There's an NFL quarterback on his knee behind a U.S. Marine, by the way, which is ironic enough. He's on his knee, and basically he's saying, I'm not going to stand up for this country with its racist, murdering policemen. This delegitimizes police authority, and it contributes to this narrative that I think just simply does not exist. It's not to say there are not bad cops out there. It's not to say that every now and then there is something that's really either very suspicious or, in fact, downright something that the officer needs to be prosecuted for, and they usually are. But this idea that police officers just go around, beating up and murdering people is made authentic when somebody like Colin Kaepernick takes a knee. And I maintain it makes your job a lot more dangerous.
You are exactly right, and I would also say this: statistically, the corrupt police officer is less than 1%. You'll find more corruption among, ironically, ministers and judges and attorneys, as I understand the statistics. And I always say is when I'm talking to people out in the community, I always try to reinforce that really only 2% of the people in the world need to be watched. Half of one of those percents need to be in prison for the rest of their natural life. Half of 1% really needs to get out of politics, and then there's 1% that's going to constantly be with us and cause issues. And in law enforcement, we're doing that. But every cop that I've known worldwide simply wants to be the guardian. He wants to stand between evil and good for the good citizens, and it's a calling. And as you well said a while ago, it's part of their virtues. And when they lose the support of the community, they do go home going, why am I here and what am I doing? And that's the tragedy. As we mentioned boobies, it's kind of like high noon many years ago when Gary Cooper, the community turned against him when he was trying to rail in 5 bad guys. He stood his ground and he did his job and he stood up to his oath, but afterwards he said, I'm getting out of the business. And ironically, I think that if this anti-police narrative does not get turned around, that we will not and are not recruiting the best of the best. And that's a tragedy for the community.
I was doing some research into the entire premise of Black Lives Matter movement, and the latest statistics I could find were for 2014. And in 2014, it turns out of all the black homicides, of all the black people that were killed in this country, in 2014, 6% of them died at the hands of policemen. And, sir, that's not 6% who had their hands up and were just shot in cold blood, as they want you to believe. That's the total number of homicides of black people were caused by, I can't, honestly, God, if I remember, it was 4% or 6%. It was something like that. I think it was 4%, come to think of it. And my point is, if you're going to make a movement about 4% of the problem and you're going to ignore 96% of the problem, that's not a serious movement. What is your attitude as a law enforcement officer to bad cops, to cops who go too far? Sometimes bad people get in there. Sometimes the stress of the job is more than they can take. But what's your attitude towards that handful, that really very small handful of police officers that do cross that line?
We exit them out of law enforcement is what we do. You know, is the simple SOP. If you lie, cheat, or steal, and that cheating includes if you abuse people, if you don't respect people, we're going to ask you to leave the organization, and we're going to stand with that and say, you need to go do something else. This is not where we need you. And I know that most administrators across the country feel the same way, and most leaders in law enforcement, and more importantly, the officer on the street feels that way. He doesn't want those people in here either.
Yeah, it makes his job much more difficult and makes his life much more dangerous. Finally, Sheriff, I just ask you this. I guess this kind of question's more rhetorical than anything. But what do we do about this? I mean, I think that you mentioned that maybe 1% of police officers are corrupt. I suspect about 1% is the number of Hollywood executives that aren't corrupt. There is this gigantic machine out here that's determined to push this kind of this, I don't know. I think it's the same thing with George Lopez, Sheriff. I think Lopez made that tweet because he wanted street credibility, right? He wanted to look tough. He wanted to look like he wasn't going to take any crap from authority. And it's all this kind of posturing. I know for a certain fact if George Lopez ever had anybody break into his house, he'd be on the phone to the police right away. I don't suspect he'd be calling any MS-13 people come over and bail him out. What do we do about this? Aside from the fact that every police officer out there has got this burden, in addition to now their law enforcement burden and their hazard to their lives, they also have to be publicity agents as well, don't they? They have to be goodwill ambassadors and try to overcome this bias that's coming from over the hill behind me here.
What I think that has to happen, obviously, is some of the things that we're doing here is creating a relationship with our community, regardless if it's a Latino community or African American community. We want relationships with all those. But with George Lopez and people like him, is one, I don't know that I can change their minds. I don't know that I can get them to come over to our side of thinking we're not here to hurt people, we're here to help. But the best thing I can do for him today is he's invited at any time to my agency, and I want him to try to figure out where these bad cops are. And I'll be happy to put him in the squad car with great police officers who stand between evil and good every day, and let him stand with them for a little while and see what he thinks after that. If he would come out and experience this, I think, and maybe speak from an educated standpoint instead of a prejudicial standpoint, which he does. So I just extend that invitation to them. Come on. Let's come on out here and get in our shoes and walk a mile in our shoes and see what you think afterwards, and see if we can help.
Did you hear that, George Lopez? That was the sheriff of Tarrant County offering you a chance to come in and spend a day with law enforcement and find out what the police are actually like. And I'm calling you out on it, and although I don't speak for the NRA, I suspect they are calling you out on it too. Why don't you go out there and see what it's like? Because I can tell you one thing, George, I've seen a number of people make comments like the ones you make, and every now and then, they'll either go on a ride along for the day or they'll go to one of those training classes where they will put a gun in your hand, George. They'll put a gun with blanks in your hand, and they will put you in the kind of situations that policemen have to face every single day in this country. And after you go through an hour of that, you are going to feel differently about all of this. So either you're ignorant about this. I don't think that's the truth. I think you're doing it for ratings for your new show. And by the way, before we let you go, Sheriff, I just want to show you the George Lopez clip for his show that's about to open, because if you think back to The Matrix, take a look at this and tell me what you think.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm back. And I got a brand new HBO comedy special, and it is live from Washington, D.C. Lots changed since the last time I was here. So I'll be addressing the most important social issues facing our country today, like how organic is organic, dogs and strollers, and the rise of newer and even more exotic sounding food allergies. Oh yeah, and this. Tune in. It's going to be very satisfying.
Imagine my surprise when you see George Lopez with a sledgehammer knocking down a wall, and it's in slow motion and the chips are flying. And it looks exactly like The Matrix, and then he's holding his sledgehammer, big, tough guy, Mr. Rebel, and all the rest of it. Sheriff, I hope he takes you up on that offer, and I really hope he does. I suspect he won't, but I hope he does. And for people like me who live here in Los Angeles, I just want to tell you personally that it gives me a chance to sleep a little more comfortably at night. Not only that knowing that their law enforcement is out there, but that the people that I grew up respecting as heroes, the sheriffs and so on, that I always respected as heroes, are in fact real people that really live out there. And you're certainly a great example of one of those. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thank you, Bill.
We just barely have time to add one thing here to go out on a somewhat happier note. Don't forget that challenge, George, okay? Don't forget. We were talking about this story all last week, and we just got one little button on the end of this to give you very, very quickly. The Donald Trump versus CNN thing, remember, where CNN intimidated this guy for making one? Well, as it turns out, they've come up with the all-time king of these Donald Trump versus the CNN meme video things. So let's just run it real quick, and we'll get on out of here.